All right. And once again, I am CT Tamura, and this is New York Buddha Dharma. And tonight we just finished our meditation, and tonight the talk is on the Bodhisattva Path, and we're working out of the book Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, written by Chogyam Trungpa and edited by John Baker, as well as somebody else, I believe. Was it just John? Does anybody know? It was somebody else too, right? It was edited by John Baker and Marvin Casper. So, the Bodhisattva Path. So, I took my Bodhisattva vow in a place called Koyasan in Japan. Not recently, this is a few years back. And Koyasan is the home of Shingon Buddhism in Japan. And it's like this really cool, like, I highly recommend it to anybody traveling anywhere near, like, sort of Osaka or Kyoto or Nara. And it's this mountaintop region. It's like a plateau ringed by mountains. Like, I think there's like 7 mountains or 7 peaks or something like that ringing this plateau. And there's like, I don't know, like 120 temples, temple inns and stuff, and it's like all the food is vegetarian and all this stuff. It's like, but amazing food. They've had like 1,000 years to perfect the food there, but so what Shingon Buddhism? There's a guy named Kobo Daishi Kukai, and he's like attributed for creating one of the Japanese alphabets. Not the kanji, which is the characters that come from China, but I believe it was the katakana. I believe it's the katakana, either the hiragana or the katakana, which is one of the phonetic alphabets in Japan. So this guy Kobadaishi Kukai is like, he's a stuff of legend there, and he's supposed to be enshrined there. And the Shingon Buddhists believe that anybody can take their Bodhisattva vow. They allow lay people. They allow any person who walks into a Shingon, I would assume temple or location or center or however they prefer to define them. And you can take your Bodhisattva vow. So I did that actually with my cousin Kyoko, when we were visiting. And it was nice, and I kind of knew, at the time I'd read about Bodhisattva vows and read about Bodhisattvas and stuff, but we took the vow in Japanese. So she probably understood what we were saying. I had an English translation underneath the Japanese one, but we were going so fast that I was kind of like, to be totally honest about it, I was sitting there and I was being like, whatever. It wasn't Nam-myoho and Geiki, but I was basically like mouthing syllables and kind of like coming a little late because I was trying to do it in Japanese. So I was like, yatashi, like just trying to sound like I knew what I was doing. And why am I telling you this story? The reason I'm telling you this story, other than the fact that I found it amusing, was that it was interesting to me that I think different traditions, I don't know if all traditions that you guys are aware of, maybe, do all traditions allow anyone to take the Bodhisattva vow? I feel like they don't. I feel like a lot of them, they want you to first take your refuge vows and do other stuff first. Sorry, maybe you could just say it in the mic, for the benefit of all sentient beings.
The way Trungpa Rinpoche, I'll tell you how I took refuge, but this is the way, Sasha, sure. I took refuge in 1976, and you had to get an interview with Rinpoche first. He would look at you, ask you your name, and then he would be sitting at a desk, and he would write something down, and then he would do a calligraphy. The next day you would go for your vow, and then you would get your name in English and in Tibetan, and a calligraphy. But then when it came to the Bodhisattva vow, you had to have studied something on the path for a while, taking classes and everything. Then you had to meet with your meditation instructor if you had one, or meet with Rinpoche if he was around, and to see if you were ready to take the Bodhisattva vow. And then you would have to get permission, and then you could take it. So it was not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
You had to be very serious about it. But I don't think there's anything like that in like the Theravadan tradition. I don't believe. I think what you're talking about in Japan, isn't that Vajrayana Buddhism in Japan?
I'm not totally sure, honestly.
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Very possibly, yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know about other sanghas, but that's the way we did it. And then you'd get another interview, and then you would have a calligraphy in your name. You would be given a name. And then actually, you weren't really even allowed to share your bodhisattva name with people who hadn't taken refuge or taken bodhisattva vows. It was something that was, kind of like personal. You could only share it with people who have already taken the bodhisattva vow. But that was kind of like a big deal.
Also, you would give something to the teacher. You also would be giving something an offering to the teacher.
Yeah, and it couldn't be just anything. It had to be something that was very meaningful to you, and give it away. So, I remember I gave my favorite Beethoven album. Then we had records then, album, and then my favorite blouse. And I was really very exhausted going through how I had to give this away, but I did it. And people would give amazing things away. And for years we would always talk about, well, what did you give for your bodhisattva vow? Well, I gave my grandmother's this or that. Or people would really give a lot of things, precious things. It was a big deal.
I think that what is I find interesting, right, is that there are these differences in the way different schools and traditions look at the bodhisattva vow, and from somebody who just walks off the street and sits down and wants to take the vow to people giving away very precious things and studying and practice and interviewing and all kinds of stuff. And I I think that I think that the part of the vow, right, is or the essence of the vow is that you are, bodhisattvas are vow to not attain full enlightenment in order to stay back and help like all other beings attain enlightenment before they do. So there's a sense of in some ways putting other people first, but really a sense of trying to help all sentient beings on the path, and I think that's part of the reason. That would be my guess, and I'm certainly not an expert on Shingon Buddhism, but it would be my guess as to this is part of the reason why they allow anyone to walk in and take a bodhisattva vow, because they're sort of allowing people to sit down and express this sentiment and this desire to help all sentient beings in some ways before themselves, right? And I think that I wouldn't presume to know sort of how Chogyam Trungpa thought about it, in the sense that I feel like there is also benefit when you're teaching this kind of stuff, when you're teaching Buddhism, when you're teaching the path. There's benefit to giving people milestones, right? There's benefit to presenting steps and things. I hate to say it, but things to achieve, not because those things in and of themselves are that the achievement is so important, but that it also helps give structure to our practice and structure to our aspirations, right? I don't know how much of that in for instance, Shambhala is a matter of structure and just providing structure for different people on the path, and how much of it is something else. But I think that the core of that, the core of the vow, which is this aspiration to help other beings find enlightenment before oneself, is probably the most important aspect of the Bodhisattva Path.
Well, I think one of the things that was so amazing about Trungpa Rinpoche and the way he conducted teaching and being a teacher was that he really wanted his students to take things seriously, because once you take refuge with the teacher and then you make a commitment to that teacher and then you take bodhisattva vows, he's also involved. So it's a two-way street. So he wanted his students to understand what they were getting into. Taking the bodhisattva vow was very, very important. And the other teachers at that time, there weren't that many teachers, nobody was doing anything like that. But his students were very important to him, and he made time for them, and he took time to really relate to each one, individually. And you didn't see that in other sanghas. So, but it didn't mean that other teachers weren't great, because, for instance, my daughter took refuge when she was about 8 with the 16th Karmapa. And he got off of his throne, and he went around, and Jangma Khantrul Rinpoche was walking behind him. And the Karmapa cut everybody's hair. When you take refuge, you cut a piece of hair. And then Jangma Khantrul was just giving out pieces of paper with names on them. And I remember thinking at that time, well, that's so hokey. Because the way I did it was, you would get an interview with Rinpoche and then give you a calligraphy with your name. But then, years later, Khyentse Rinpoche, who's on the shrine up there, he came to New York after Trungpa Rinpoche died, and he was giving a children's blessing in the house where he was staying. And I asked my daughter to come by. But at this time, she was 14 or 15. And she had never actually had a name given to her when she was a child. So I asked Khyentse Rinpoche to give her a name, and he gave her the exact same name the 16th Karmapa gave her when she took refuge with him. The exact same name.
Wow.
So I told him that, and he was like, no big deal. But, the blessings of the teachers, every sangha does things differently, so there's still blessings. But with Trungpa Rinpoche, it was different because he was really, not into spiritual materialism. And at that time, you could take refuge with 10 million teachers, and you could take all kinds of vows. But with his students, he wanted to make sure they knew what they were getting into and that they were serious about practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think and I'm getting a little bit away from the book, but I think that there's probably some correspondence to the amount of weight that you put onto the vow yourself, versus the as compared to the dedication, the amount of dedication that you have to it, right? A lot of times when you work harder for something and you've had discipline and had persistence on something, it tends to maybe mean a little bit more to you when you get to that place, when people make it more difficult for you, whether that is difficulty is artificially created or not. It's still about the effect that it has, and that makes a lot of sense. I think that let me read something from here. This is on the Bodhisattva Path here. So the thing that I find very interesting is, okay, we've kind of defined what the Bodhisattva vow is and sort of what the goal is, right? The enlightenment of all sentient beings before oneself as, being part of the vow. But I find it very interesting. The question is like, well, how do we actually do that? Like, how do you get there, right? And what does it actually mean to be on the Bodhisattva path? What does it actually mean to like me or you or you or you to tread this path? And one of the things he says here, I think, is great. He says, and this is kind of talking about how we get to the Bodhisattva path. And he says, being aware of a situation on a small scale also brings awareness on a larger scale. Out of this develops panoramic awareness, Maha Vipassana, or the Pali is Maha Vipassana, meditation. That is awareness of the overall pattern rather than the focusing of attention upon the details. We begin to see the pattern of our fantasies rather than being immersed in them. We discover that we need not struggle with our projections, that the wall that separates us from them is our own creation. The insight into the insubstantial nature of ego is prajna, or wisdom, or knowledge. Transcendental knowledge, he calls it. As we glimpse prajna, we relax, realizing that we no longer have to maintain the existence of ego. We can afford to be open and generous. Seeing another way of dealing with our projections brings intense joy. This is the first spiritual level of attainment of the Bodhisattva, the first bhumi. We enter the Bodhisattva path, the Mahayana path, the open way, the path of warmth and openness. And the thing that I think is really great about this, right, and very important, is this very beginning where he says, be aware of the situation on the small scale also brings awareness on the larger scale, right? And that's kind of what we're doing in our practice, right? When we were sitting here, and we're meditating, we're kind of working on observing what our bodies and our posture. We're trying to work and observe on like our minds and how our minds like to take us away from the present, right? The ways in which we get distracted. These are sort of little things, right? Very important and very big, very important to our practice and our understanding of ourselves, right? But that's sort of what we're working on, is awareness of what's going on in the present, in our minds, in our bodies, in the room around us, and what happens, right, is as we start to see how our minds work, the more we sit here and practice that, observing what's going on in the present for us, right, the more we start to understand the way that our minds work. We start to see how our mind affects our body, for example, right? So if your mind is really tense, chances are your body is pretty tense somewhere. And when we start to see that connection between the way our minds work and the way our bodies work, or we start to see how, as we get distracted and start telling ourselves stories or having conversations with ourselves in our head, our awareness of what's going on around us dims, right? It's almost like, I was thinking about it when we were meditating earlier, it's almost like we go, as the more active our brains become and our minds start telling all these stories, and it's almost like a movie in our head that we start watching, right? We start watching this movie about whatever the story is that I'm telling myself about, whether, what I got to do tomorrow, and like all the meetings, and will I get home at night tonight in time to go to bed so that I can get 8 hours of sleep so I can wake up tomorrow. Whatever that story is that we tell in our head, it's like a movie that captures all of our attention. And instead of seeing what's in front of me when my eyes are open, and I'm meditating, I'm seeing a movie in my head. And instead of hearing, what's happening in the present, I'm hearing my own conversation with myself. I'm hearing this story, this movie that's going on in my head. And it's true for all of our, I don't feel, instead of feeling whatever is happening in this moment, I'm kind of like imagining feelings, and like my body's sort of reacting to like feelings of the story or the movie. If we've ever sat and watched like a movie, or actually I'd really like to watch, to talk about the feeling that I get when I watch like MMA, like an MMA fight or maybe a boxing match. If you haven't watched MMA, like my body gets really tense. Have you guys ever noticed this? You watch boxing or you watch a fight, like on YouTube or I find myself getting physically tight and watching this movie. And it has nothing to do, there's no chance of the fighting coming to me through the screen, but I get so wrapped up in the movie of it, in the story that I'm watching, that my whole being gets wrapped up in it, right? And we do this exact same thing with the movies in our heads, in the stories that we're telling ourselves. And every time we do that, we are disengaging and sort of closing off from our senses and from the present and what we're experiencing. So my point in this, right, is that we are every time we kind of recognize the relationship between our minds and our bodies, and our minds and our vision, and our minds and the present, in this sort of, I would call it a little way, or he might describe it as on a small scale, right? We start to be able to understand, when we can see that relationship clearly, we start to get glimpses into how the world works in the large scale, right? Because it's not just my mind that works this way, it's everybody's mind that works this way. I mean, we all have our differences, but we all have our similarities too in the way our minds work. And it's that there's all this wisdom that is gained from understanding how our minds work. And there's all this wisdom and sort of knowledge embodied in the present. Like when we were doing this meditation just prior to this, I was saying how there's a lot of information, a lot of data, almost, and that might not be the best word for it, but that our senses can receive if our senses are open to it. And the only way to do that is by practicing meditation, to become more and more aware of what's going on in the present, because our minds constantly want to play a movie for us and distract us from it. As we start to see the way this all relates, the way the present relates to us and the way our minds relate to the present, it allows us to, to act in the moment more clearly. It allows us to act with greater skill, right? Skillful means would be a Buddhist term that he mentions in this chapter as well. But it really is. It's skill in terms of interacting with the moment. And the only way that we can interact with the present is if our sort of the movies in our brains are kind of shut off, or at least we're not paying attention to them and we're giving our attention over to the present. Now, why are we talking about this in relation to Bodhisattva Path? We're talking about this because what all these things are, and I'm gonna read the next section, which talks about the 6 paramitas and these aspects of the Bodhisattva Path. But what these things are they all stem from our ability as a person or as a bodhisattva or someone on the path to be present. And the more present we are and the less distracted we are by the stories we're telling ourselves, the more we're able to act in a manner that is appropriate to each moment. And where that kind of comes in terms of like working with sentient beings, it has to do with simply like dealing with one another, right? It's not just, it's dealing with, it could be dealing with inanimate objects, but when we talk about bodhisattva, we're talking about dealing with people, right? We're talking about our interaction with beings. I shouldn't say just people, but beings. And that could be It could be cats and dogs, and it could be trees and grass, and all sorts of beings. But the idea here is we lay out these things that that embodies the bodhisattva, that the bodhisattva embodies and follows and lives. But it all stems from the same thing, which is just our ability to see things clearly, moment to moment, and react appropriately. And when you see things clearly and react appropriately, that reaction encompasses a compassion, a natural compassion for everything that's going on and everyone that you encounter, every being that you deal with. And I feel like that is the key. I really feel like that's the key to walking that path. And the more present we are, the better we're able to walk that path. And it's kind of what I think he's getting at, but in slightly different terms. So I want to read this about the paramitas and Tathagata. So, in other words, the idea of Tathagata is a way of inspiration, a starting point. It tells us that other people have already made it and that others have already experienced it. This instinct has already inspired someone. The instinct of awake, of openness, of coolness in the sense of intelligence. The path of the Bodhisattva is for those who are brave and convinced of the powerful reality of the Tathagata nature which exists within themselves. Those actually awakened by such an idea as Tathagata are on the Bodhisattva Path, the path of the brave warrior who trusts in his potential to complete the journey, who trusts in the Buddha nature. The word Bodhisattva means he who is brave enough to walk on the path of the Bodhi. Bodhi means awake, the awakened state. This is not to say that the Bodhisattva must already be fully awake, but he is willing to walk the path of the awakened ones. This path consists of 6 transcendental activities which take place spontaneously. They are transcendental generosity, discipline, patience, energy, meditation, and knowledge. These virtues are called the 6 paramitas because param means the other side or shore, the other side of the river, and ita means arrived. Paramita means arriving at the other side or shore, which indicates that the activities of the Bodhisattva must have the vision, the understanding which transcends the centralized notions of ego. The Bodhisattva is not trying to be good or kind, but he is spontaneously compassionate. That's a big one. The Bodhisattva is not trying to be good or kind. He is spontaneously compassionate. And this stuff that this is what I'm saying about the spontaneous compassion. It arises with seeing clearly what's going on in the moment. And the way that we get there, the way that we can act with spontaneous compassion and sort of clear seeing and skillful means is by being present in our interactions with other beings. And I think we were saying earlier, we could talk about the paramitas. We could probably give an hour-long talk on each of the paramitas, or days-long talks on each of the paramitas. I don't know. But I think that, to me, what's actually really useful to take from this, yes, these qualities are very important, right? So they're what a bodhisattva would most likely embody, right? Generosity, discipline, patience, energy, which is also joy, meditation, and knowledge. All these things are, he's presenting it as a way as like, these are the things that you kind of attain, or these are the things that you work on, or these are the things that you develop. Another way of looking at it is these are the description of a bodhisattva. Right? A bodhisattva will be all these things. And I find that interesting because I feel like, and this relates a little bit to the Shingon Buddhism and different ways of letting different people, in some cases people that just walk in off the street take this vow, is I think that we all have the ability to be a bodhisattva in any given moment. In fact, I know we all have the ability to be a bodhisattva in any given moment, in the sense that if we are present in that moment and we're really seeing what's going on, it allows us to act appropriately to whatever's going on. And it allows us, by being present and aware, it allows for spontaneous compassion to arise. And that spontaneous compassion will inform our actions in that moment. So for me, rather than just, as a question, right, rather than focusing on the individual paramitas, these beautiful qualities that bodhisattvas share, I think it's interesting to kind of ask ourselves, and maybe we could, and if you guys would be willing to maybe share, if you can think of an example, situations where maybe we had like just a little step, like a little baby step down the Bodhisattva path, where we came into a situation with an agenda or something on our minds, something that we wanted to get done, and then saw something or something happened that changed our allegiance from the ideas in our head about what we thought we were getting into, the situation we were entering into, and we're suddenly maybe faced with something different, and how that may have affected your perception of the situation and or your actions. And I'll give you an example. So I have a number of good friends. I'm not a fan of Trump. I'm not a fan of President Trump. I will admit that. And I have some very good friends who and family members who are big fans of Trump. And I remember sitting down with my friend and talking to him about it. And in the course, he's like, "Yeah, I think Trump's going to do a really good job." He's like, I want the economy to go well. I think he's going to do a better job of that. He's like, "I don't really care if people came into this country illegally. Like, I don't really care. What if they get deported or whatever. That is not a concern of mine. And if Trump wants to deport them all and build a wall, that's totally fine with me." And as we're having, that's a general synopsis of the conversation. And as we started to have this conversation, I started to get a little bit worked up. I started to get a little bit of kind of, and I'm just like, and I was sitting there, and I'm like, how can this person who I know and love and who is a good person at heart, I have no doubts about it. How can this person say these things? How can this person say that and be like, "Yeah, I don't give a fuck what happens to immigrants, or Mexicans or whatever." And I had a moment where I realized, because I was having cognitive dissonance, right? There's a person that I know to be a caring, honest, good person, raising 3 kids and working a good job, and taking care of his family, and he's a really good friend to me and other people. How could this person feel this way? And also be this person that I was sort of starting to demonize in my head, right? I was like, this is crazy, this conversation I'm having with the person. And I realized that what I was dealing with was not really exactly so much my friend as it was an exhibition of fear that this guy was having. Because as we started talking, I was like, I started asking him questions because I wanted to understand what his thinking was. And I asked him but why? But why? You don't care. You don't care about what illegal immigrants and what happens to them. But why don't you care? And what ended up coming down to was he was afraid. And he might not have put it that way, but he expressed the concern, right? And so subtle fear, we'll call it. But he expressed concern about how, he was going to take care of his family. He was worried about, man, I got 3 kids to feed. I have a wife that I love, and I got this house and these bills. And what happens if the economy goes south and we go into another recession, and I'm in, construction, and I lose my job, and because the development stops, and I can't afford to make my house payments or pay for put food on my family's table. He wasn't quite that descriptive, but that's what the sentiment that he was expressing. And in that moment, it all started to make more sense to me. It didn't mean I agreed with, his conclusion on the situation of, illegal immigration or Trump or various policies, right? But what made sense to me all of a sudden was where it was coming from, right? It was coming from a place of fear. It was coming from a place of being afraid of uncertainty, And when I realized that, it made it much easier for me. I just had an aha moment of sorts, right? Where the anger and the aggression that was building up in me from my own fear of not understanding what I was dealing with, that dissipated, and suddenly I had the ability to see and be like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. Suddenly I'm seeing that situation clearly, and the only thing that was now arising in me was a little bit of a compassion, and it wasn't a condescending compassion. That's very important. It's not something where, if you feel like, oh, I'm better, I'm more enlightened than this person, I should have compassion for that person. That's not it. It's it's a recognition of our shared experience, right? It's a recognition of oh, when I'm afraid, I act irrationally and make bad decisions or statements, say things that I don't mean, or if I'm angry or whatever that emotion is, that negative emotion that hijacks my brain and makes me, say or do things that maybe aren't the most thought out or the most compassionate or the best thing ultimately for all of us, right? And that recognition, it's that recognition is it's sort of the little, it's both, right? It's the little recognitions and it's the bigger recognition of how things actually are. It's understanding how I work, understanding that when I'm afraid, I make irrational or bad judgments, or it tends to trigger negativity or aggression in me, and seeing that happen in somebody else. And when we see that recognition, when you see yourself in the other person, right, that is a basis for real compassion. And that's also the basis for the ability to make decisions and act in a manner that's appropriate to the situation, right? If I just started laying into him because I'm like, you're an asshole, what the fuck are you talking about? Excuse my French, but that was what I wanted to say, and I wanted to go at him. I'm very went to school at a very argumentative high school, and I love arguing. I've argued in every relationship I've ever had. I'm very inclined to argue with people when I disagree with them. But that wouldn't have helped him. I'm a Leo too. I will fight till the cows come home. But this recognition of this situation is what allowed me to act in a way that was oh, let me ask questions. Let me say oh yeah, I understand. You're worried about the economy. You're worried about your ability to take care of the people that you love. I worry about the same things. I have exactly the same concerns. I bet just about everyone has exactly the same concerns. It might manifest differently, But and the point of all this is just to give you an example of a situation where, you know, that ability to be present and see things for how they are helps maybe a little bit take a little baby step down the Bodhisattva path, right? A little step here and there where that recognition of how things actually are, you know, it sort of unlocks our ability to both perceive things. I mean, really just unlocks our ability to have compassion, and not idiot compassion, not just compassion that is just like without seeing, right? But helps us to be compassionate and also act in a way that is appropriate to that moment. Does that make sense? I feel like I got a little off there, but that makes sense. So, so does that make sense? That, I mean, I feel like I'm getting some nods of yeah, and yeah. I mean, I would love to hear also your comments, but also if you can think of, I feel like it's always good to apply this stuff to our actual lives, right? Like, was there ever a situation? Can you think of a similar situation where there was some moment of realization where you started to see things clearly where you were not before, and that helped you or helped the situation or helped a relationship or anything like that?
Well, what comes to mind?
Just hold it, yeah.
What comes to mind is what you started to speak about, which is the paramitas. And I'd be curious how you would see what you're discussing and using the tools of the paramitas.
So I actually may not be able to answer that question, to be honest. Partially because I feel like the paramitas, right? So you're saying like specifically, like how could I apply those paramitas in that situation? Oh, okay. Because what I was going to say is, for me, the paramitas are, you don't have to, like, they talk about not distinguishing. Chogyam Trungpa talks about not distinguishing them. To me, they're a natural outgrowth of that situation, of that recognition of how the situation really was, of what I was dealing with was actually fear on the part of somebody, you know, that in front of me. So, but if I were to, you know, I mean, I think generosity, discipline, patience, energy, meditation, and knowledge. I mean, there's a lot, right? But so for me, I would say that there is patience is an easy one, right? Applying some patience there in terms of, you know, not reacting initially, like not immediately being reactive, and having some patience. That patience kind of helped. So having some patience kind of helped me explore what was actually going on rather than being reactive to it. And then once I saw it more clearly, it also helped me. It helped me work with the person and be understanding and provide an environment of sort of calm and openness, as opposed to being closed and aggressive or you know, reactive. Does that make sense? And I would just also, I mean, I feel like it's almost hard for me to distinguish, because all of it is wrapped up in the same thing, and it all stems from the same place, right? It all stems from the recognition of what's going on and the compassion that is inherent to that situation if you're open to it, if you see it. Does that, I don't know. Sorry. Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting that in your situation that you were seeing more like the humanity of the person you were speaking to, instead of sort of closing off like you might have, or treating it in this, his ideas. How do I make this clear? I thought it was interesting because I think I've had similar experiences where instead of focusing on what I want or what I need, you all of a sudden you're able to empathize with the person and you're like, oh, wow, this I need to do what this person needs right now. So, I mean, my situation that comes to mind is one that I think I've told a million times before, but it was just where, a teacher of mine had encouraged me to pick up the phone sometimes instead of texting. And then I had a situation where a friend of mine was clearly upset about something, and she just had a miserable week where she had food poisoning and allergies and was feeling and had deadlines and was trying to get stuff done. And I was like, this calls for me to pick up the phone and listen to her. I was just flabbergasted at how awful she was, such an awful week she was having. So, but somehow it was just seeing clearly and realizing, it was seeing myself that I was I had a habit of pushing stuff away or not wanting to see it clearly. And then once I avoided my habit a little bit, then I was able to see things a little more, slow down, I guess, and see the person for who they were and what they needed. And then I was able to provide it. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that it's subtle but important point too that, when we let go of our egoistic ideas of what we want out of a situation and what we need out of a situation and it's really what I want, what do I need, what am I trying to, what is the outcome that I'm looking for, and then truly be present with what is being put out in front of us with whoever we're dealing with, then you can, again, it's the same thing as, getting rid of, stopping watching the movies in our head about the outcome that we're trying to get and the drama of will this happen or will this not happen, and just dealing with what's in front of you or who's in front of you and what they're dealing with. And when you see that clearly, right, it helps. It helps you act appropriately. You have a choice. Do I want to, if it's like a fight, if you're in an argument with somebody, do I want to escalate this argument or do I want to, relax this argument? You start to have, as long as we're not reactive, as long as we're not just following, creating these stories and these parameters in our head about what we want to do or how we want things to be or how we're trying to work to make them, we can actually just work with the situation at hand directly as opposed to trying to project onto it. Yeah.
So this room is where I first heard about the frozen space of ego, and in Trungpa Rinpoche's writing, openness recurs over and over and over again. And I think the first time I hit the concept, it was very abstract. Like openness, I kind of know what that is, but I didn't know what it meant or how it might be used. And as time goes on, I'm seeing a more nuanced version or vision of it. In this case, I would say that when I'm arguing with someone, as a general rule, I've imagined myself as being right and the other person as being wrong. And as I'm then trying to arm myself with more reasons why I'm right and why they're wrong, the space closes down. It actually completely freezes, and I can't even see the other person anymore because that story machine that you were talking about before is just accumulating ammunition that I can use against the other person. And we don't exist in a space anymore. I've just built a wall in between us. And I think that's pretty interesting. I don't know if that resonates with your experience at all, that conceptualization of it.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar. I've heard the term before, but it totally makes sense. It's almost like, because in a way, right, each moment is a living, breathing thing that changes instant to instant. It's always changing. But what happens when we get fixed ideas in our head is it fixes our perception of reality too, which is never accurate, right? So you get a label in your head, I'm labeling this guy Trump supporter, and he could have very easily become, and then along with that label, there's a whole subcategory of not self-aware, mean, person, doesn't give, a crap about anybody other than themselves, or selfish, blah, 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 blah. I could go down that list and then it's almost like pasted onto the person in front of me and kind of obscures my view of them because I'm no longer seeing them. I'm just seeing this frozen idea of that is never the complete story. And I think that's how I would relate to that for sure.
There's another famous saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I was thinking about your friend, I think in a compassionate way, or not your friend specifically, but people very much like him, who might construct a fixed sense of self through obligations. I'm certain that I've done this, and it's possible that I'm not the only one in the room. So he sees himself as a good provider, let's say, and so he has a mortgage to pay, and he has people who depend on him to put gas in the car and keep the car fixed and bring food home. And so he's now established a fixed point of view in a sea of uncertainty. I'm inclined, based on his performance, to not evaluate Trump as a savvy businessman, because we know that he doesn't even have all the money his father gave him. He's actually in the red at the moment. But be that as it may, even when Obama was president or Clinton was president or either of the Bushes or whatever, there are so many different things, which kind of relates to karma, which is a different night. But there are so many different things that are interacting in the world that are tossing us this way and that. Tsunamis, crop failures, blah, 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 whatever. That I think that people have to just, again, the sense of openness, be open to the possibility that their fortunes could go down and then they could go up and then they could go down and then they could go up, because I think that's how all of our lives work. I have not been on a perfect upward path for the last 40 years or so. But my inability to accept the possibility that there could be ups and downs creates suffering by trying to hold that fixed position. And so that suffering, in the case of a person like your friend, seems to me the root of the fear. What will happen if this? What will happen if that? What will happen if that? Now, this poor person is spending all their energy coming up with plans for 15 different possibilities, only one of which is going to happen anyways. And that's an enormous energy drain that would, create fear. What if I've made 15 plans and the 16th thing that I didn't plan for is actually what happens, as opposed to just being in the moment, trying to see clearly and trying to make good choices with what I'm presented with, instead of, endless speculative schemes for fame and glory. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that it's funny that you mentioned the road to hell being paved with good intentions, because that was actually something that I wrote down as a note for this talk too. Because that last sentence that I read, the Bodhisattva is not trying to be good or kind, but he's spontaneously compassionate. We have all had that experience, right? Where somebody is trying to they're trying to be do good things, and they totally mess things up and make the situation worse, right? And the question is, why does that happen, right? And it happens because of exactly what we're talking about. It happens about when people get a notion fixed in their head about how they're going to make things better, and what better is, and maybe they totally miss what better actually is, and that is, I can't, I remember I was in high school. I was a freshman and sophomore in high school, and I had two friends, and a guy and a girl, and they had a crush on each other, and I started and I knew that both, and I was well, I'm gonna help them out. I'm gonna get them together, and I started like going back and forth, and honestly, it's so long ago I can't really remember like all the details of it. But like a day after like a day of relaying messages or something between the two of them, they were both mad at me and like, you know, like what are you doing? And I was like, I was just trying to help. I was just trying to get you guys together, you know. And I don't know if they ever like I don't know, like I think they did get together, but it was without any help from me. And if anything, all I did was delay and make it awkward and weirder for them, you know. And like that kind of stuff happens to all of us, right? We have good intentions, but we're not necessarily seeing clearly what needs to happen. And so much of it is about having fixed ideas about what is good, what is bad. No. Yeah.
I think that everything everyone is saying is really true because it's a Bodhisattva path. Nobody comes to the Bodhisattva path completely getting an A+ in the path. It's a teacher lays it out for you, and then you try to practice it. And there's always the ups and downs. But if you practice, you know, if you have your sitting practice and you study the teachings of the Buddha, then it progresses and it becomes stronger and stronger. I think the main thing to remember is that the Buddha said, everyone has Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha. And when you see someone on the road, you know, you look at someone, you know that they have Buddha nature. You recognize their Buddha nature, and you recognize your own Buddha nature, and then that creates a space. And within that space, you dance, whatever the dance is. So, but that's the view. The view is very important in Buddhism, what your view is. It's not us against them. The view is we all have Buddha nature, we all have the enlightened gene, but we're not all exactly alike. Everyone has their own different karma. So let's say we were born in a certain place, we came in, like Rinpoche said that 25% is the parent's karma of a child that's born. The rest is their karma. And it's the karma of from their past life, the karma of where they were born, the city karma, the country karma, the world karma at that time. And so these are all the things that we're all dealing with. The important thing is to have a sympathetic outlook, to develop sympathy towards others, but you can't really do that until you develop sympathy for yourself. So that's why the Hinayana path and taking the refuge vow is so important, because first you work with yourself. And Rinpoche used to say that you can have the best intentions about, like this was in the in the 70s when people were demonstrating and they were like peaceniks and things like that. But you could have the best intentions, but if you don't work with yourself first, you're going to be polluting even more. And so once you establish that you have a sympathetic outlook for yourself, so when you see yourself constantly like screwing up, let's say, or missing the point always, then you kind of like give yourself a break and to always take a fresh start. There's always room for a fresh start. And then when you work with other people, you give them a fresh start too. And the thing about your friend being in his home, see, the thing is, you were really trying to give him the benefit of the doubt because he was your friend and you were in his home. So he had a lot going for him. But let's say you were at a bar and you were having a conversation with a total stranger, how sympathetic would you have been then?
It's harder, much harder.
It's much harder. And so when you meet teachers, like Tibetan teachers or any kind of teachers, that are really open and really have traveled on the path, let's say, they're completely open. So it doesn't matter who comes into their space. They're open to the situation. it's not about them or about the person. They're just open to whatever is going to happen in the situation, and they relate to you completely because they're not trying to get anything for themselves. So it's like, a different kind of level, but it's admirable what you did.
Well, I mean, I think there certainly were other ways I could have worked with, generosity or energy. I could have sang a song and danced a dance and
the thing
diffused
is,
it or.
It's very, very difficult to bring all those paramitas into play when you're being hit by all the bombs, like the bullets that you're totally personally against.
Yeah. It's when it triggers you, and it triggers you.
Yeah, like everything he was saying was something that was, I don't believe this, I don't believe that. I don't know, how can he believe it?
And recognizing, that recognition of when you that you start to get reactive, right, and aggressive or scared, that is in and of itself just, it's like the same thing, right? That you're experiencing, you're having a similar experience when you're feeling like you want to attack somebody, like the fight or flight thing, right? It's aggression, and that aggression is really masking fear, right? I was afraid. I'm afraid that I don't know this person, that I'm going to suffer for being his friend, that the world's going to be a worse place because there are people that think Trump is a good president in the world, and what am I really getting aggressive about? I'm getting aggressive because I'm afraid.
I recall, is there a quote that was sent to us the other day about being right is aggressive? Yes, this comes from Ocean of Dharma, and Trungpa Rinpoche had a quote which was, "To be right is to be aggressive," and it really pierced my heart.
Wow.
Share that with you.
That's great.
Because we'll take it a step further. When Rinpoche said that when you tell someone how you feel about something, you expect them to reflect back to you that they feel the same way or blah, blah, blah. But if they're not reflecting back to you, then you get upset. Or if they have a different feeling, so that's also aggression. It's like you can give your opinion and then just give that other person the space to have their opinion.
There's something else too. Hold on, that relates exactly to that. Right. So it was talking about the paramita of discipline. As we proceed further and examine the paramita of morality or discipline, the Shila paramita, we find that the same principles apply. That is, Shila or discipline is not a matter of binding oneself to a fixed set of patterns or of laws or patterns. For if a bodhisattva is completely selfless, a completely open person, then he will act according to openness. Will not have to follow rules. He will simply fall into patterns. And I think that relates, right? It relates to the idea of being right? Morality, or having a set of rules. If there's a set of rules, then there's right and there's wrong. It's right, the rules, you're following the rules, you're right. You're not following the rules, you're wrong. The same can be applied to morality or whatever. And that's again that version of the frozen space of ego. That freezing of your ideas. And so that's great. Being right is aggressive. Was that what I said? Or aggression? Yeah. Being right is aggression. That's fascinating. That's very astute observation on the part of Chogyam Trungpa. He had a few of those. Yeah.
So I find that sometimes English can be a remarkably tough language to talk about spiritual things in. And I've been doing a lot of thinking recently about the phrase all sentient beings, because I think that that's not a bad phrase in and of itself, but it has a lot of shadings that have escaped me. And so on the one hand, all sentient beings includes each sentient being. So a bodhisattva might be vowing to stay until the very last hard case escapes from samsara. But I think another way of, and I don't think that's incorrect, but I think another way of seeing it is all sentient beings includes every sentient being, no matter who they are or what their point of view is. So if I were on the Bodhisattva path, that means I don't save my friends and family first. It doesn't mean I save people that appear to be of the same race as I do. It means that if any being comes to a Bodhisattva for help, they get help, period. No judgments, no ifs, ands, or buts. And I think that's a really powerful idea. Because I think a lot of, I don't want to say non-bodhisattva, what I was brought up to think of as conventional charities sometimes, I don't want to say discriminate, but they exercise discernment in who they choose to help and who they won't help. And so my understanding of the Bodhisattva path would be the opposite of that. Anybody who needs help gets help, period, done. Which I think is pretty interesting. Sure.
The skillful means to know how to work with any situation that comes up. That's the key.
But what you said reminded me of that.
Yeah.
The openness.
No discriminate. You don't discriminate.
You need help. So you're
Yeah.
exactly the same as every other sentient being that needs help.
Exactly.
Regardless of any appearances to the contrary.
Exactly. And the thing with this, what's happening in this country right now is, forget about that. Someone told me the other day that this airline, Air Berlin, went out of business. And her friend had bought a ticket with Air Berlin. It's a German company. And now he can't come to New York because his ticket is no good. So I was saying, well, that's really terrible. I mean, the other airlines should just give these people, because they declared bankruptcy, so they're not obligated to give them any money. So they should just take these people and give them seats that are available on their airline, because not every plane is full. And she was like, nobody's going to do that. I said, I know that, but I'm just saying that would be good if someone did.
Right. There's a limited number of people who find themselves in the situation, and so after they were helped, that would be it.
Yeah.
It's not like the other airlines would be taking on a long-term operation.
Yeah, because
Like 600 people.
Yeah, because when you're on the Bodhisattva path, you think in a different, your view is different. So you think, well, they can just absorb those people into different airlines, like German Airlines or whatever. People say, okay, well, I'll just take these people on my plane. And then she says, nobody's going to do that. That's not the way business is done. She said, I'm a businesswoman. I was like, well, so am I. I mean, and then she said, and then I said, well, the German government, they have a lot of money. They should help these people out. She said, they don't care about that. Things are different there now. So, I mean, it's one thing after another. It wasn't that I think that would have changed anything, but it's really good to present different views. Even though people think you're crazy, but it's good to even have these views because it gives you space to think in a different way, not the habitual, oh, too bad, bad luck. Open the space and think of different, see how a situation is workable. That's what Trungpa Rinpoche used to say. Everything is workable because you have space.
It's all about exploring. And when we have when we have the open space, everyone could become an explorer. And that was something he spoke about in many different ways. And it's funny, though, what you were saying, because for all you know, wherever you might have been at that moment, you could have planted a seed. And there might be somebody now, karmically, who will take that action. And maybe maybe something could happen just because you put it out there. You never know.
I absolutely know that. I had the feeling, even when I was saying it, that that's exactly what's going to happen. And all the people that have tickets on Air Berlin are just going to be put on other flights, and everything's going to work out perfectly for them. But there had to be like one person that could even see that view. There's never, if no one ever sees a view like that, then it doesn't happen. The energy is not being put out.
I think there's a degree to which it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. Certainly, if your friend says, nobody's going to do that, then if that's her response, then if that's everyone's response, then it will never happen. But I would say, without being judgmental, that seems to me to be an example of an unskillful response. Because considered on its merits, which you just said, it makes perfect sense. It's a limited number of people. Air Berlin is not materially different from every other airline. Any airline could go out of business at any moment, because that's how business is done on this planet at the moment. And what's the big deal? So your friend could have said, that would be really challenging, but it's a really good idea. And so that's an idea of openness. Anytime someone makes a suggestion, really consider, even if it's the most unconventional thing I've ever heard in my life, I should probably not respond reactively in a negative way and just shut the person down.
But just having said that, I don't need to be right. Just put it out there. Just put it out there. And then even though she thought, this is never going to happen, I was like, it's okay, because I expressed how I felt, and then the rest is just out there in space. So she doesn't have to agree with me. I don't need to be right. But it was when you have a feeling in your heart, like you can expand your heart, you can open your heart up to the people who have tickets that are worthless, then that energy goes out. And that's a sympathetic outlook.
I would just add something that I think, talking about the need to be right maybe is something that relates to what we were saying earlier, which is, when you let go of the need to be right, then you can actually start helping. Right?
The possibility of right arises somehow when it's not being so sought after in a way.
Yeah, I
also think that, again, not to judge your friend, the example that you gave is not, I don't think she needs to take my point of view. I think that her action can teach me something about my own behavior. But if I see myself as a person with a worthless plane ticket, then I would respond to the needs of others in a different way than if I saw myself as superior to them because they chose a crappy airline and I always choose good ones. Right? That's a way of shaping my world by how I think about it. My reality just changed when I made a better choice. Not a right choice, but a more skillful choice, if you will.
I think, I think we should probably end. There are snacks waiting for us. But the thing that this makes me think about is that, and what I kind of want to leave everyone with, is that, regardless of whether you've taken the Bodhisattva vow or not, right? We are all on that path. Certainly if you're studying this, but we all have the ability to take steps down that path, regardless of who we are and where we are in life, what our practice is or our study and all that. And like, all we have to do is see things for how they are in each moment and then act accordingly, and that just requires letting go of our egoistic notions about how things should be or being right. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. I think it's beautiful that we can all sort of walk down the Bodhisattva path, even if we fall off or are on it like a little bit of the time and not a lot of the time.
That's why we recite the dedication of merit.
This is also why we recite the dedication of merit. Thank you. And I like to explain this too before we do it, in just that the idea is that the merit that we've accumulated in our talk and in our discussion and in our practice, that is not just for us, right? Because that would just be seeing the little what did they call the small scale, right? So, but then taking that stuff and putting it out to the larger scale, we are then dedicating the merit that has been accumulated to all the rest of the world, all sentient beings. So, yeah. So, by this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy of wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, guys. Thank you for